Hi everyone, my name is Beth Wilson and I am excited to welcome you to a new video series that focuses on the power of storytelling. In each episode, I'll invite a guest to share stories that will help us understand discrimination and inequality in order that we all might learn and grow together. You might be wondering why I'm focusing on storytelling particularly to do with heavy topics like racism and discrimination. It's because stories are so powerful. It's through stories that we get to peek into the life of someone else and walk in their shoes. And when we tell stories about our lived experiences, whether those experiences are positive or negative, we can start to understand a different viewpoint. We can learn from one another, and we move just that much closer to becoming anti-racist. So as you join us in the video series, I hope you'll walk away inspired by some incredible people and feel equipped with some resources to help you lead your own transformational storytelling conversations. And with that, I am thrilled to invite my very first storytelling guest, my colleague and my friend, Andrea Nicholls. Andrea is the CFO of Dentons Canada and has an incredible mind for technology, numbers, and strategy. She thrives on building strong, high-performing teams and is a valued member of our National Management Committee for Dentons Canada. In both her personal and her professional life, Andrea is a passionate advocate for anti-racism and brings incredible insight on how Black professionals experience the workplace. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you very much, Beth. And I'm very, very honored to be your first guest and talk about something that, as you said, I'm very, very passionate about.
That's great. I'm glad you're here to talk with us about what has been an incredible topic of conversation throughout 2020. So perhaps, Andrea, the best place to start is with some personal reflections on how 2020 has unfolded in your professional network. So what have the conversations been like with your Black colleagues and contacts?
Well, that's a fantastic question. 2020 has been out of this world, something that nobody has ever really thought could happen. And for being a Black professional in this environment, I have never seen something like that. The conversations that we have as Black professionals, how the events of this spring and summer, we had the George Floyd event, we have the US election, we have Breonna Taylor, how all of these events have impacted us, have touched us both personally and at the office. It's the first time actually that we as Black professionals have had the spotlight put on us in terms of how we feel and how we're reacting. So a lot of firsts for us and a lot of mixed emotions and being open and vulnerability as we participated in panels and spent some time talking about what we felt. It brought up a lot of feelings, things that have happened to us in the past, feelings that we've had that we haven't experienced for many, many years that were kind of buried inside. So it's been really cathartic and actually very positive.
Andrea, I think there's actually a good lesson there in what you just said for leaders listening today. One of the important things that I think we can do as allies and as anti-racists is to create that kind of safe environment you're talking about where you can be vulnerable, when you can be emotional, when you're sharing your story, and for that to be respected and viewed as professional and frankly human, right? So creating that human environment where that can all be shared and brought forward. And that's a really critical part of creating an environment where we can do storytelling, right? And learn from storytelling.
That's right.
You know, Andrea, most people, I think if you ask them, right, would say they're not racist, right? And if you ask them why they think they're not racist, they might say something like, well, you know, I have a colleague, or, you know, my sister dated a Black guy, or I have a team member who's a person of color, or I always value diversity at work. But having those relationships and valuing diversity don't really preclude someone from being racist, and they certainly don't make you anti-racist. Underrepresented professionals really do have a different experience in corporate Canada versus people who are white. So when you think about that, what does racism look like for you in corporate Canada?
I think racism really takes the form of two things for someone like myself. The first piece is really the concept of microaggressions. That's the situation where you have a million tiny little reminders every day that you are, number one, you're not like everybody else. Number two, you don't necessarily belong here. And when someone keeps on hearing that all the time, it becomes internalized. Um, I'll tell a story about that. And this is something I think that's been experienced by many Black professionals, certainly many in my circles who are close friends of mine and colleagues of mine. I was coming out of an elevator after a late night working at the office. I think it was budget or quarter end or something for an accountant. That would ring true. So I was tired. Come into the elevator, saw somebody in there, and it's like, hi, oh my gosh, you're working late too. What country are you from? That was the first thing. It's like, so again, I'm already on my guard. Why am I from a different country? What about us getting in the common elevator in an office building downtown Montreal tells you that I don't belong here? So it's that constant reminder that you always have to be proving yourself. You're always the only one there. And that's the second part of the piece. The second part of the piece is that concept of being the only one. The being the only one, you know, looking at senior leadership at many corporate entities and walking into the room, actually not even only senior situations. From the time I started my career 30 years ago, was very difficult to find another Black person who you could look at. So I think that those two pieces, not seeing yourself being represented and then constantly being reminded you don't necessarily belong here, are what we call microaggressions. And after a while, you know, it can get into the psyche, and really we don't understand why, when we know that we know a lot of qualified Black people that have the qualifications and the education, but need that opportunity to move forward. Some of them who have been lucky as I have, who have had people who take a chance on me and say, hey, I think this girl's credentials are good and we can move forward with her. But a lot of my colleagues Black colleagues haven't been as lucky. So you really are really feeling as if you really don't have that representation in the room with people who look like you. And that's tough, because again, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't see anybody else every day who looks like them.
Yeah, Andrea, the microaggressions, I think we've heard that term quite a bit this year as we continue to learn and understand. And let's take the one that you raised, because I think that one is pretty common, right? So people will ask the question, well, where are you from? Where were you born? Are your parents from here? I don't know. There's sort of any form that can take. Have you changed the way you respond to those types of questions, or how do you personally handle those?
I think with experience, you learn to personally handle them a lot better than you did when I would say that I was younger. I think, you know, you throw the same question back in that situation. You know, I'm from here, where are you from? So you kind of turn the tables where the person's a little bit surprised as to where you're from. The challenge then is not to become bitter, right? Because when those situations start happening to you all the time, sometimes what you would do is just naturally try to not lash out, but answer sharply. But I think that just learning to turn those tables and to try to make the person see, well, this doesn't make sense, because if I would ask you the same question, how would you feel about it? Right. I have another story where I have a very close family friend who's a partner at one of the big four, who went to his Christmas party and then was asked, one of the other partners asked him for a drink. So meaning thinking that he was a waiter at the party. So, and this is actually happened last year at a big four. So we've got a long way to go to be able to make people aware that we can't have this kind of thing happening. This has an impact on people. It has an impact on us. When we come home and we talk about it to our family and friends, our kids hear us. So what do our kids hear when we tell them those stories? Are they then motivated to move forward in their education and in their corporate world when this is the world they're in? It's got an implication everywhere.
Yeah, the stories are interesting, Andrea, because I think often, you know, business leaders or when you're members of an organization focused on diversity, we talk about kind of the numbers, right? Or the business reasons behind inclusivity and why we should have diverse teams, because you get better outcomes, better performance, better results, etc. But I don't think we often sit back and think about what is that personal impact for, you know, people of color, for Black professionals, for Indigenous professionals, that the personal impact you feel, to your point, when you walk in the room, every single room you've walked into for the better part of your 30-year career, and you're the only in the room, right? And what that means for young professionals who are looking for mentorship from others who have had the same lived experiences, et cetera. And so just building on that then, for corporate Canada, again, coming back to 2020, where there has been real momentum at all levels, right? Not just in business, but grassroots, on the streets, social services agencies, young people in the universities, in the colleges, so much momentum from the tragic incidents that we saw. Why is it so critical that corporate Canada jump on that and move that anti-racism momentum forward?
It is so critical because it's the only way, if we become intentional, that's the only way we can move things. And I think you hit it at the beginning of our discussion. Most people do not think of themselves as racist. And I have to believe that the majority of people aren't necessarily going to put a boundary there. But it's really important. The numbers speak for themselves. We do not have a large percentage of Black professionals in the corporate world at certain levels. We need to be intentional in order to move the mark, in order to really hit those goals. And some of the things that, you know, we talk about, for instance, at Denton's we've been very intentional, and luckily having the guidance and the leadership and the space to be able to share our ideas, share what we are going through as Black professionals. We've actually set up a Black professionals network where we're focused on really moving the dial. One of the first things you as CEO have done is signing the Black North Initiative pledge. So, which is pledging to have a certain percentage of Black professionals here at Denton's. So those intentional actions by leadership to move forward make all the difference, and being conscious of the biases that we have, whether or not it's in the hiring process, it's in the day-to-day activities as to how we talk to our Black employees, how we promote them, how we talk to other Black colleagues as well. All of that wraps up together in creating an environment where Black professionals can excel and move forward. And having those examples make all the difference. If for me, as we talked about before, if I had 30 years ago somebody who I could look up to who would be in that type of position, I think it would have been a very different journey for me. And representation and seeing somebody like yourself makes all the difference.
Yeah, so actually, you know, Andrea, on that point, we're so lucky to have you for so many reasons in our C-suite at Denton's. And as a result of that, a number of our Black professionals have reached out to you, whether they're in one of our business services functions or some of our younger lawyers, which I think is terrific because you're not a lawyer. You come from a different professional background. When you reflect on those conversations that you've been having with Black professionals across the country, what jumps out at you? Are there any, genericize the stories, of course, but are there any stories or themes in the conversations that you've been having with them?
The themes are actually very similar to the themes that I have, which is actually was a little bit depressing for me because I consider myself part of the old guard. you know, in 30 years in a corporate career. And I was very surprised to hear some of the stories from some of the younger professionals who were very similar to my stories, and just showed that things have not changed as much as we thought, or I would have thought or hoped that they have had. Similar stories in terms of dealing with clients that don't necessarily, you know, think that they're just they're not actually a lawyer, but they're you know, a defendant. It was just some crazy stories that we've talked about. The good thing is, when we talk about who have reached out to me, I love the fact that in the setup of our Black Dentons network, a lot of non-Black people reached out to me to talk about how interested they are in the cause and being part of the network. Allyship, and we get back to allyship, it's so important. It's those words, because we all know from a business point of view, it's those words that are said about you when you're not in the room that often make the difference. So having an ally and making sure that maybe you say a word about somebody, regardless of where they are in the totem pole, a good word about them can make a big difference. So it's really important that we remember that the problems were not caused by Black people per se, so they can only be fixed by us alone. We can have all of the, you know, all of the protests and marching, which are fantastic, but we also need allyship, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we talk today, and why I'm so impassioned about having this conversation, to let everybody know and understand that it's a partnership. It takes the whole firm being committed to the goal. Not only Andrea and the couple of Black people who are at the firm, it takes everybody moving in the same direction for us to move forward.
Andrea, and I didn't warn you that I was going to ask you this question, but as I think about, so not only are you the only senior Black professional in the executive ranks at Dentons, but you're also a woman. So there's a lot of interesting conversation in terms of the intersectionality, and I love you because you're so blunt and direct. And I remember, wasn't that long after you joined Dentons, and you picked up the phone and called me, and you said, "How come everything we do for women shows a bunch of white women on a panel?" And I thought, you know, good on you. And so I think calling those things out as we see them are so important, right? And that's an important thing that allies can do. But just on that theme of intersectionality, you have a daughter, and I know you're super proud of her because we talk about her quite a bit, and I've had glimpses of her as we're all working virtually from home. How has she experienced 2020, like through the eyes of a young person? And what do you see a difference in her versus you? Any thoughts there, or stories or insights that you could share?
It's so funny you asked that question. It comes up all the time in our conversations. Things that it would take me a little bit of time to jump on, she's already there. She's already there. She doesn't have that, oh my gosh, I'm the only Black person walking into the room. What are they thinking about me? I better have to perform 5 times as well. She just walks into the room, which I think is a great thing. I think that 2020 has been really moving for her. She and all of her friends, you know, they're on protest, they're protesting. They're on Instagram all the time. The things sometimes you see on Instagram are crazy, but they don't hold back. And I think that that's a great thing. I think some of that vulnerability or hesitation that we had at our age, I think that has changed for the younger Black generation. And I think that's a great thing. I think they've also seen what we've experienced. I think they, as I said before, they hear when we're talking about our experiences, and they find it unreasonable. And I can't understand how you can tolerate that, especially as women. My daughter's very up on women's issues, but I think that it's for the better, and I think it's going to move forward generation to generation. And I really think that this time, I think we have the opportunity, we have the eyes on us, and we have the opportunity to move the dial. Mind you, people that were around in the 60s would probably say that it was similar then too, right?
Yeah,
But,
it
you
sounds
know,
pretty inspirational to me, actually. The words bold and courageous are the descriptors coming to mind when I hear you talk about her and her
oh yeah.
friends. And maybe that's a good place to leave the conversation, which is with a bit of inspiration. So what are some of the resources that you would recommend for anybody watching today who would really like to learn more?
Sure. In terms of the corporate point of view, there was a fantastic book that I've read by Minda Hart, and I would really ask anybody to read that. It's called The Memo. It's What Women of Color Need to Secure a Seat at the Table. I think obviously this book was written with Black women in mind, but it's got some fantastic stories about exactly what we're talking about before, stories that have happened to her, Minda Hart, as a Black woman in corporate America, and some of the things she's passed through, some of the things she needs to be mindful of. I think that book is for everybody to be aware as an ally what a Black woman would go through in the corporate setting. So I think it's really important to know, to be able to walk in the shoes of someone else. I think looking at what the Black North Initiative is, as well as the Black Opportunity Fund, I would ask anybody to go on their website and to read about what are some of the things that their goals and their aspirations and what they've been working for. The Black North American Initiative has had 350 corporate entities sign up for the pledge. So a huge amount of Canadian entities that are focused on increasing the number of Black professionals in corporate Canada, as well as the Black Opportunity Fund, interested in funding and putting capital into some of the Black entrepreneurs here in Canada. So those two sites, I would ask you to go on to them and really understand, because many of your companies have signed those pledges and have pledged to support those causes.
It's great. Well, and I just heard a book that's going to be ordered as soon as I finish this with you. So, okay, well, thank you, Andrea, so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us today. You know, you've been a great mentor for me and a real source of guidance and wisdom as I've tried to navigate 2020, which has been pretty uncharted territory, frankly, as a white female CEO. Your wisdom, your guidance, a real honor to be able to share you with others today. And through your stories, the ones you shared today, the ones you've been telling me in our many calls over the past few months, I've taken away a lot of lessons that will stick with me for some time. And I really, really appreciate your vulnerability and the strength that you bring to leadership at DENS. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. And I want to just put that back on you. Thank you for giving me the space and the opportunity. I think it's so important to be able to come authentically with yourself to work every day. I feel that we have the opportunity to share ideas, share viewpoints, and really have the opportunity for me to be myself and to share the opportunity or the experience of being a Black woman in corporate Canada here. So thanks so much for this opportunity today.
That's great. And for those of you listening today, please help our conversation. Share your resources in the comments section that you've found helpful in your own journey, either as an ally or someone with your own lived experiences. And I hope you feel inspired to listen, learn, and grow through the power of storytelling. Thanks for joining us today.